It's incredibly important that our discussion of all matters begins with who God is and his character. I guess this is even more important when we come to the subject of leadership. I've become convinced that a major problem in the Western world, and very probably the whole world, is our absolute worship at the idol of individualism. You see, God is a community, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So leadership is from a community. A community rules the universe. That leadership reproduced community, Adam and Eve, a marriage. And throughout the Bible, what we eventually come to see is it's a community book. God is from community, through community, to community. As a result of the fall, Satan, who is an individual, reproduced himself. Adam had a broken relationship with Eve, and Adam and Eve had a broken relationship with creation. And so instead of loving oneness, we end up with chain of command. And in reality, no matter who wins the battle of the sexes between men and women, eventually Satan wins. Because it's about who's at the top of this chain of command. And the reason that's a loss is, in a sense, no matter how loving the individual might want to be, when it's an individual, the primary thing in the end will be power or control. It's chain of command. You see, for love to rule, you have to have community. Love has to have other people. That's why God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So God is love and a loving community from whence power emanates. So in this subject of leadership, you may think, well, that's an interesting concept, but how does that work practically? Well, in some sense, it's not rocket science. God was a community, created a community of Adam and Eve. In other words, the leadership of the world was placed in the hands of a marriage. So God-like leadership looks like marriage. You might say, here we go now, it's about headship and submission. No, the primary reason for marriage was oneness. You see, there is headship and submission in God himself. There is headship and submission in marriage. But the true nature of God is he is one. And the primary reason for marriage is oneness. And so any headship or any submission or any other role is designed to serve the oneness and therefore serve the love and honour between the participants in that community. So when we look at some of the structures we see around us, you don't have to look too far to see this. When people think of me, they think of Bernard and Jenny. Jenny's my wife, of course. I'm staying at friends' houses, and it's James and Janine. I've got all sorts of friends, and I think of them as the couples, and I know both names. And yet many of the so-called apostolic movements, super churches, and the like, when you think of leadership, you end up thinking of one person and one name. This doesn't mean that they're bad or evil, but it does come from the wrong seed, Adam's seed of individualism. And you know, the best you can get is like David's leadership, the kingship of David. Individual leadership, at its best, is benevolent kingship. But if we want to see God leadership, then we need to break down the models that we have and start reproducing the kingdom community that God has. Now, some of you will shout back at me now, but we do have team. Now, I'm not talking about having a team. I'm talking about being on it with equality, with oneness, with honour. Mirroring God, mirroring marriage, not management. These are the sorts of teams that actually honour God himself. Now, someone might say, well, Jesus was an individual. No, Jesus did everything he saw the Father doing, and he did it all in the power of the Holy Spirit. Everything about Jesus was community. The three persons of God acting in unison together. Hence the agony at the cross when Jesus thought his Father had forsaken him. Leadership, godlike leadership, is community-based. And therefore, that's what we must be.